Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Today we are going to be talking about Remy Bader, who we actually haven't talked about in a while. The last time we talked about Remy Bader, she had lost a significant amount of weight and people were kind of confused as to why she hadn't brought this up. Now, if you're not familiar with who Remy Bader is, that might not really make any sense, and you might be like, why do people care? But the reason that this became kind of a problem and people were talking about it was because Remy Bader got popular being a plus size, body positive, fit or fashion content creator. A lot, if not basically all of her content was based around the fact that she was a bigger person, and a lot of her fan base were also bigger people that were inspired by her. They saw the things that she was doing, and they thought that it was really cool that she was a bigger, bigger woman, bigger girl that was posting this stuff and, garnering a following and working with all of these different brands. So Remy is someone that was really popular in the body positivity space, a larger creator that was definitely very fashion forward, someone that talked a lot about fashion and talked a lot about being in a bigger body. Now, one of the first times that we talked about her was because she actually had gone on a podcast where she was talking about her experience with a GLP-1 medication, and she became incredibly popular. And one of the things that I noticed through looking through her TikToks is that she was always, it felt like, very real, right? She would talk about the things that other people maybe won't talk about, and she was, she didn't hide everything, and she was always very honest. And so when this weight loss started happening, people were obviously very, very curious. But Remy basically said that she refused to really talk about her weight anymore, and she didn't want to mention it. And so people were a little confused as to why she didn't want to bring this up. And, I made a lot of comments about that. Like, in and of itself, if you look at someone losing weight, obviously you're not owed an explanation or anything like that. But things change when you are a content creator who is making significant amount of money based on the stuff that you're putting out there. And when you start to make this huge change and not really mention what's going on, it makes sense that the audience that you have is going to be very curious about what is going on, and they're going to feel a certain type of way when they feel like they're not being, they're not getting any information and no one is sharing that stuff with them. And so what has happened very recently is that Remy actually went on a podcast with one of the Kardashians and kind of came clean about how she ended up losing this weight. And there has been a huge amount of controversy, but people just talking about this whole situation on TikTok and just online in general. And so I wanted to play a couple clips from the podcast, nothing super crazy, because I am on vacation right now visiting family, but I did really want to talk about this because I feel like I've mentioned this phenomenon before, and it's so interesting seeing it kind of blow up into what's been happening recently.
TikTok star Remy Bader details her past experience with the Ozempic and says she gained double the weight back after using it. The content creator opens up on the Not Skinny But Not Fat podcast with Amanda Hirsch, saying,
I get triggered by so many things with weight because I'm also sensitive to it in a way that I'm like almost annoyed that it's this trendy thing now when I went on it for like actual
Why were you
issues.
offered it to go on?
Pre-diabetic, insulin resistance, gaining 50 to 80 pounds, like reasons that
But I wasn't judging real reasons.
She then outlines her experience after stopping Ozempic.
Once I was, a few months later got into the bad binging and went off it, and I saw a doctor and they were like, it's 100% because you went on Ozempic, because it was making me think I wasn't hungry for so long. I lost some weight. I didn't want to be like obsessed with being on it long term, and I was like, I bet the second I go off I'm gonna get starving again. I did, and my binging got so much worse. So then I kind of blamed Ozempic.
So this is a clip from the podcast that she had with Khloe Kardashian, where she is talking about this weight loss surgery that she ended up doing. And so I wanted to play this clip so you guys could see what exact surgery she ended up getting.
For you. And I was like, why would I do something that he's telling me isn't going to work? So I was like, what's the alternative? There's also the bypass. So again, this is all under bariatric surgery. What he told me is that there was a newer surgery, which is what I did. And what everyone online, of course, at this point, everyone's like, okay, well, she did one of the shots or she did the sleeve or something. Like, no one guessed this because it's not a known thing.
So new.
So it's called SADI, which is a very long name, but it's like the acronym is SADI, which I would say is a mix of both of those surgeries. They cut out 80% of the stomach. They move around the intestines. I also was...
So she ended up getting the surgery, which I did a little bit of research. And what this is I think what most people call it is the duodenal switch, which is like the name that I've heard before, because we've actually talked about different people. We've had people on the channel that have had this surgery. So it goes on to say, SADI is a type of weight loss surgery for people with severe obesity, also known as class 3 obesity. They typically have a BMI of 40 or greater and at least 100 pounds of excess weight, right? And then so it says, how does SADI work? The SADI procedure combines sleeve gastrectomy, I don't know how to say that word, with intestinal bypass to promote greater weight loss. It's performed by removing about 80% of the stomach to create a tube-shaped sleeve, separating the top part of the small intestine, duodenum, just below the stomach, reattaching the duodenum to the lower section of the small intestines, which shortens the intestine by about half and decreases calorie absorption. After the SADI procedure, you'll need to follow certain nutritional guidelines. Your bariatric team will provide specific instructions on how much protein and fluid you need. You also need to take vitamins and supplements to prevent malnutrition. Lifelong follow-up care is required after a SADI surgery, right? So clearly this is a very intense surgery that she ended up getting to get rid of this weight. And now, obviously, it is anyone's choice to decide if they want to get a weight loss surgery. That is something that I'm not even fully against surgeries at all. I think like with the different injections that we have now with the GLP-1s and the surgeries, I think that all of that stuff is good for a specific person, and everyone needs to make that decision whether or not they want to do that, right? But where things get messy is when we are talking about someone that has made a living for themselves, talking about being confident in your body no matter what, being, healthy at every size, right? Be like just the complete opposite of undergoing such an extreme surgery as well, right? Because this isn't just, taking a GLP-1, which, she took those in the past and that ended up being for her, like she said, it was not a good experience for her, right? And so, and even when that happened, people had something to say because, again, she made the majority of her following based on being a bigger person, being confident, saying that you can be big and be confident and be beautiful and you shouldn't let that define you and all this stuff. But it seems like people feel a certain type of way because it seems like rules for thee but not for me kind of thing, right? It's like, this is what you should do if you don't have the money to fix it like I do now because I have made so much money being an influencer. But now that I have all this money and I have all these connections, I'm going to change everything that made me relatable to you. And I think that that's what is one of the biggest problems of being an influencer, especially an influencer in a specific niche, is that once that relatability is gone, a lot of your the people that looked up to you and the people that followed you, they start to leave, right? It's something that I've even noticed myself as someone that was a weight loss influencer, right? When I first started making videos 12 years ago, I had a lot of people that were like seeing that I had just lost the weight and they were really inspired by that. But now, it's been 12 years. I'm not like, I don't think about weight loss all the time. I've kind of moved on from that, and certain people have moved on from the channel, and that's fine, right? Like that just is what it is. But it's one of the problems when you are an influencer that's based on people feeling a certain type of way, and like, I like this person because I feel like I can relate to them. Once that relatability is gone, it's really hard to, it's almost impossible to really get it back, but it's really, really hard to get those people that maybe were inspired by the things that you were doing and they really liked the stuff that you were doing before. Once they start to feel kind of alienated by your content, it's kind of game over. And that's what I feel a lot of is what is happening here, is that it's not like it's just someone making a small change from the kind of content they were making to what they're making now. It almost feels like a complete 180, right? Switching from, you can be happy and be big and you shouldn't have to change for anyone, to then having a dramatic surgery that is very, very intense, and then losing all of this weight. And in the process of that happening, you are not talking about this when in the past you have been very open about everything that's going on in your life, right? It is just the complete opposite of these things that you have, stood for in the past, and people felt a certain type of way. And I think it's really interesting. There's a TikTok that I want to go over, which is someone that definitely is a little bit more in Remy's community than I am. And it seems that they feel a very similar way, as well as a lot of the comments on this TikTok are very illuminating as well. So let's go over that. So this is the TikTok right here. You know, it has 38,000 likes, you know, millions of views at this point. And it says Remy Bader went from relatable to largely disliked, and it's because she turned her back on her supporters. Remy's Bader controversial shift from supporter to disliked. Explore why Remy Bader lost her fans and the reasons behind her controversial transformation, right? And so this is someone that knows probably a lot more about that community than I do. So let's see what she has to say.
Finally announced that the way that she lost weight was through weight loss surgery, and we need to talk about it. Here are the issues I actually do have with it. I don't have any issues with the fact that she had weight loss surgery to lose weight, obviously. People who are saying that are weird. To find
And I agree. And the thing that's frustrating is that a lot of times when people are talking about, oh, this is what people have an issue with, they end up just focusing. It's almost similar to kind of like Amberlynn Reid, right? Focusing on the most extreme thing that people are saying, that maybe a tiny minority of people are saying, that's very easy to be like, see, isn't this crazy? I'm so disliked and I'm so hated and people are being mean for no reason, and not engaging with the genuine things that people have to say and the genuine, you know, concerns that they have and like the good points that they bring up, right? They just focus, people like this end up just focusing on the most extreme, over the top example and not at all mention the, you know, more nuanced takes that people are having, right?
thing to do. Here's what's crazy. Number one, because she went to being overweight to like very thin, seemingly overnight, and would not address it. After she had spent years and years building a fan base of people who followed her for her plus size content. Now, I'm not saying that she needed to stay plus size. If you're going to create a platform based on plus size content and create a fan base based on people who look up to you because either it's relatable or that's the type of content that they want to see, and then you lose a bunch of weight, shifting your content entirely and not addressing it at all is why people are like, what the fuck? Why didn't she say anything? Also just...
Exactly. And it's just strange that it was a secret. It was like, yeah, you can say, I wanted to protect my peace. And it's like, okay, fair enough. But it's like when you've made so much money and you have talked about it so much and it's become a part of your personality online, when that big thing that is what you're all about changes, people are going to be like, what happened, right? Like, what is going on? It would be like someone, their whole channel is based about, you know, doing reviews of toaster ovens, and then they stop making reviews on toaster ovens, and then it comes out in a podcast a year later that they actually hated toaster ovens the whole time and they never enjoyed it at all, and they don't understand why people are mad at them. It's like, dude, that's what people were watching you for. Why are you so confused, and how are you confused about the fact that people are like, hey, what is happening here?
Going on a Kardashian podcast to say this. No one follows the Kardashians because they're relatable. They follow the Kardashians because either they look up to them or they think their lifestyle is like crazy and, you know, want to follow along. Remy Bader was like a household name at one point for being mid-size plus size content, showing relatability in outfits and life experiences and just talking about day-to-day, like what it's like to be a plus size person, and created this whole community and then dropped them. And there's no issue with...
And that's the biggest thing, is the dropping, right? It's one thing to have your content change and maybe even talk about the fact that it's changing and why it's changing, because your life is changing and you feel differently and you're not making the same type of content. I feel like that's a completely different thing than just not mentioning it, completely changing your content and making content that the majority of the people that enjoyed your previous content would be like, this is literally the opposite of what I followed you for. Right? It makes sense that they would be like, hey, what's going on here?
With her losing weight. If she wanted to lose weight, that's totally fine, but you have to acknowledge the fact that that's who your fan base was. You're just kind of leaving them in the dust and not even saying anything. Not talking about how you lost weight, not talking about why you lost weight, like... And I know people are going to be like, she doesn't have to do those things, but I kind of disagree with that because that was her whole content. She was a relatable content creator. And because her whole platform was created based on these people following her. She would not be anywhere that she is right now if the people who supported her hadn't supported her along the way, being the plus size community. Also, this is not a video for anyone to go hate on her.
So I think that that's,
Going out
you
with my
know,
friends tonight, Remy Bader.
a lot of really good points there. And if we look at the comments, right, it's really interesting, right? I did not recognize Remy Bader. Perfect example of what you're talking about is our girl Samantha Joe. The key phrase, not addressing it at all. That's the problem. Look at Glamzilla. She was open and honest about her weight loss journey, and her fans who supported her. It could have been Remy. And then there's other people that still, you know, think that, hey, so Remy doesn't owe anyone an explanation ever, period. And it's just like, that type of thinking, I feel like, is so black and white. It's like, you don't owe an explanation to anyone. Like, yeah, I mean, technically you're right, but for people, it makes sense for them to feel a certain type of way when they feel like they have been almost lied to, right? I think that it makes, you know, it makes sense, right? Her whole thing was plus size try-ons, and then went on a Kardashian who support insane EDs and beauty standards. It's weird, right? Like, you know, it's honestly worse than just ignoring it. She actively blocked people asking, right? So it was like she was intentionally trying to hide this fact, and people had a problem with that. This whole situation, I feel, is really interesting because it goes into what I've said many times before about, like, you know, when you're a content creator and you make content about a very specific thing, you're kind of almost not like forced to continue making that content, but you do have an obligation, right? I think, to those different people and like the different things, right? Like, I think about like a lot of people that are, you know, people that are trying to be weight loss influencers, that if they're struggling with their weight, they have to kind of explain, like, and you might think, oh, that's weird, why would you have to explain? But like, when you start to make a ton of money and you're making all these brand deals and like all these people are supporting you because you're saying that you're going to be doing XYZ thing, and then you are not doing that, people are going to be like, hey, what is going on here? What is happening? Why is this thing that is the reason I support you, why is that not happening anymore? And you can argue whether or not that's fair, but, you know, I don't think we've ever been in this position as a society, which is, you know, where we are now with influencers that are making money based off of being relatable. And then when that relatability leaves, you know, the supporters do feel a certain sense of like ownership on that stuff. They feel like they have some ownership on the you know, the person that has garnered all of this money and fame based on being relatable to them, right? So this whole situation, I think, is really, really interesting. I'm curious to see if Remy will ever really respond to the stuff that's being said. You know, there's obviously a lot of information. You guys can go obviously watch the whole podcast for yourself to get your own kind of opinion on stuff. But I feel like this is an incredibly interesting thing that has been happening, and I'm genuinely curious what y'all think down in the comment section down below. But if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. If you see this hat, this is my own merch that I made that you can purchase at the link in the description. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.